welcome back to another video feature of the Immersive Worlds Handbook. Today I am at Kids Toy Museum in Portland, Oregon, taking on a tour of this rather eclectic space. So let's go inside and take a look.
Okay, so we'll begin the tour, and one of the curious things about Kids Toy Museum is it's just adjacent to the family auto parts store. And this is a brochure that you get when you enter the museum, and it's kind of an uncanny experience. You saw my video introduction there. You basically walk up to this door. There's a very nondescript sign on there, and I had read online on Roadside America and also Atlas Obscura that people experienced having to knock on the door. The door was open. I walked right in. There was a woman at the desk, very friendly, and I was the only person there. As some people noted online, there is like a it's kind of a musty scent, in the museum. And there isn't, one of the interesting things about it is when you call a space like this a museum, I think it brings into question, what do we mean by museum and curation? In a sense, you could say this is a collection on display, but there isn't any sort of interpretation going on, any signage or anything like that. One of the things you're going to note, and this is very key if you bring children to the museum, you see numerous, you'll see as we pan up here, blackface toys, very offensive anti-Semitic toys, a slew of these. And one of the reasons for this, I was reading an article in Smithsonian.com with some of the family members, and they were saying that indeed, because of the history of these toys going back to 1869, you certainly will get a fair share of racist toys, and you see some of the could be more stereotypes there up top. I'm just spinning around. I'm taking 2 passes. I took the Blackmagic camera, and then after that I'll take the GoPro with the stabilizer. But again, I think it's one of the things when you see some of these toys, just be prepared for that if you go to this museum, because certainly it would strike most people as offensive. And I also read some of the family commentary saying that they believe it's important for people to see the racism, like in these toys right here, the blackface figurines, incredibly offensive, right? But it's important, they were saying, to see this because it's a reminder of the history, the history that's embedded with the toys. And I think that's one of the most curious things about the museum. If they had maybe more of a chronology, is we could chart key points in cultural history, political issues, economic ones, and so forth, racial ones, ethnic ones, by connecting to these toys. And looking at the brochure today, I saw here that the main collection includes toys from 1869 to 1939, includes a generous display of die-cast vehicles. For local interest, mini signs, trays, and other items pertaining to the Northwest are also displayed. I'm just reading off the brochure. Again, you see how offensive these toys are. It reminds me a little bit of the debates in 2016-17 about Confederate statues and putting into context things that today are offensive. And so it's one of the things, I guess, with the Museum of the Sword, again, I would call it more of a collection than a museum per se, that maybe there's a need for some sort of signage expressing what's going on with these toys, particularly if young children were to see them. It's an issue I think you encounter when you go to a museum like this. Now, the other thing I was going to mention was that there's a lot of interesting local history about Frank Kidd, who is the collector of all these toys. And indeed, I was reading that there are over 15,000 in his collection. I also read a story in the Portland newspaper that in 2010 there was an unfortunate theft at his house, or a house that held many of the excess items from the collection. Apparently 2/3 of the collection are not even on display, and there are over 15,000 toys in the entire collection. It's a incredible undertaking when you see all these. I mean, the figures, and you just think about the value of these and the historical significance of them and so forth. The fact that Smithsonian.com did an article in their magazine, a very extensive one, and if you want more about the history of this toy museum, I recommend that piece in particular. You'll find things all over the internet, on TripAdvisor, Atlas Obscura, Roadside America, but the piece in Smithsonian.com is about the best putting this particular collection or museum into context. But just look at the massive amount of material culture here. There's even the Disneyana, the Disney figures, the figurines and so forth, which maybe are a little less interesting just because I think you see these so often, but you get some really old ones, which those are key. And if you're a Disney fan and you go to this museum in Portland, you might indeed be interested if that's your thing in terms of collecting. As you can see, it's a very functional display, right? There is no signage, there is nothing in the way of information. The very minimal brochure that you get when you enter the space, gives you a little bit of information about the museum, but it's not extensive by any means. Okay, and we'll shift the footage here with the GoPro. Just an aside, I don't know if it's something with the lighting, but sometimes when I use this stabilizer with the GoPro, I don't know, I just detect this kind of weird visual distortion going on. That could just be the stabilization on the axes. But aside from that visual information, I'm taking you into these additional rooms. So I switch cameras here as we look at further aspects of the collection. One of the things that's notable with the museum, and look at some of the dolls there. I don't know, like me, but sometimes when I see dolls like this, old dolls, there's that creepy sort of effect. I don't think it's the uncanny valley, but it's maybe just that sense of the creepiness of old dolls. But in any case, one of the things about the museum that is really notable is the collection of antique mechanical banks. And so many people that study these or collect them have said that it's one of the great collections in the country. And I think, putting this into the context of Portland, which I'll talk about in some of my other videos, is pretty significant, right? Just something like this. I don't know. I'm not saying you wouldn't find this in another city. All over the world, certainly throughout Europe, the United States, big, small cities, you see these eclectic small museums, or in this case, a collection of material culture. But I think one of the things that is quite interesting in the context of Portland is the museum's location. Again, its fame, if you will, on Roadside America and Atlas Obscura suggests that we can imagine how a museum of this sort fits into the context of Portland. If you watch the show Portlandia, there's a lot of celebration and a little bit of humor and poking fun of the eclecticism of the city. And so when you see something like this, I think it does fit in with the identity of Portland as a whole. And we're continuing to walk around here. I don't know if I need to narrate. I think we're seeing some of the mechanical banks up there. I mean, it's just such a huge collection of toys. This would be the kind of thing that if you were curating this, if you were thinking about maybe how to express it to the guest, you could somehow come up with a system where, and it would take so many, I was going to say weeks, months, if not years to do this, but you could, in a sense, catalog all the toys in each of the gallery displays here in the windows, and then you could potentially have some sort of app or a way that you could look up information. You look at all these antique locks here, those are equally amazing. You just look at some of this here. And it seems to me as we see more of the collection here, one of the things that is a reminder, I think, of a space like this is just the obsessiveness of collections, of material culture. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, obsessions can be certainly good things. If you go onto eBay or auction sites and so forth, you can think about how people will search the world for any items of material culture that maybe fit into their collection, whether they collect bottle caps or beer bottles, or in this case, toys. And I think that's a fascinating thing about pop culture when you put it into this context of a museum of toys. Okay, and it's the kind of thing, I'm at this point in the video where I'm thinking, what more do I say about this collection? I think it's the kind of thing that if you're curious about toys, I mean, I could imagine if you were a person who studied toys or games. I mean, there are no board games, but if you studied play and culture and consumer culture, this would be your place to visit. And certainly, it's such a big collection that you could imagine even doing archival work in terms of studying the significance of toys as a form of material culture, and again, that connection back to values and history and other key periods. So if you're in Portland, it's probably worth checking out. If you're curious, it's free to go in, so consider that the next time you're in Portland, Oregon.
So I hope you enjoyed the video feature today here at Kids Toy Museum in Portland, Oregon. Please come back for additional video features of the Immersive Worlds Handbook.